Good morning, church. Again, you guys still sound energetic. That's fantastic. We might just be rolling blank today. That's fine with me. There is an addendum to what I announced earlier, the fallout from Muffins with Moms. The rest of the payload has been transported from the kitchen area to the front welcome desk. So on your way out, there's easy access. And I want to say, please, make sure that they all get taken. The men who bravely stepped up and stood in the gap for all of the moms today, I can attest, slaved over them for minutes. And don't let the HEB packaging fool you. There was a lot of effort that went into those. Hey, they tasted good, right? No, we're truly in a world of hurt without you guys, so that should just be evidence of why we have a day like today. Welcome back, and this morning we are back to solving the world's problems together. I don't mean formulating a strategy to take down a silverback. We are off of that. I will say that any men that actually take up that challenge probably are evidence of why you need good mothers, because somebody did not teach them any common sense. But I'm talking about our study of Matthew, and it's going to take us to some surprising places today. At first glance, the amount of territory that we're going to cover is going to be a little bit of back and forth and maybe a little shocking. You might not see how it all fits together. And I promise it's not just a strategy to keep things moving, to keep you awake from the impending carbohydrate crash that is coming after all the muffins. I promise that when we're finished, when you look back, you're going to see something come together that is a beautiful master stroke and piece of artistry by Jesus as he's in a new part of his ministry. John the Baptist has been executed. He's stepping into a new role. He's been teaching and correcting and juggling a few things all at once at this point. He's been teaching and correcting and preparing his disciples to understand the kingdom that has been explosively coming until now. He's now interacting with Gentile groups at an alarming rate, and he's also coming into contention with the religious gatekeepers of the day who have eyes but cannot see what is happening right before them. That'll be our message for today. But as we continue to watch Jesus move in this new chapter, this new season, I want us to remember that the way Jesus and the purpose for which Jesus began this ministry is still his motivation today. He has been teaching and explaining the kingdom, what the kingdom of heaven is actually like, what the kingdom of heaven and who actually makes up that kingdom, how to enter that kingdom, how to recognize it when it is in front of you. And he's been living it out through his teaching and fulfilling the law and the Torah with undeniable signs and teaching and examples just in his life. Now, I want to ask you a question that might make you laugh. It might make you frustrated. I don't know what it's going to be, but my intention is both of you for today. Have you ever got a little tired of talking to somebody? I don't mean physically tired. And I'm not just trying to get moms to look at the people that accompanied them today and are trying to be really nice to them today. I mean exhausted socially from having to deal with a person. And this happens at different rates for me. I have a long fuse for most people. I'm pretty outgoing. I'm pretty gregarious. But I've found that it's contextual. It's situational. There's some situations that I just don't have as long of a fuse. I'm going to give you an example. General interpersonal interactions, I got a pretty long fuse with people. If I'm on any type of customer support at all, the fuse is much shorter. And if I can't understand who I'm talking to on the other end of customer support, the fuse is much, much shorter. And so help me if I'm on the line with a robot or an AI and I detect it, there's no conversation to be had at all except for me screaming, agent, 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 representative, and maybe throwing my phone at the end because they really don't want to have to talk to me at that point. What I'm saying is there are some times where you just know the conversation isn't going to get anywhere. It is going to be a waste of your time. It is going to be a waste of your headspace. And nothing that you say is actually going to satisfy them. It's not going to resolve the situation. And so what happens is you might say something to them like, okay, bet, or we'll just see then, or you'll have to watch at this point. You might give them a little bit of snark, a little bit of sass. And I just want to say that at the end of today, Jesus has a moment like that. It's our scripture for this morning where he is done dealing with these people. He is done trying to explain to these people for the moment. And he's just going to say, you need to stop talking to me right now and go back and look again. You need to stop talking to me right now and open up your eyes because you are missing everything that I'm trying to explain to you. You need to stop talking right now and just watch and see. And so we are going to take off from the beginning back in chapter 14, right after what we talked about last week when Peter walked for about 2 steps on the water and began to sink and needed an encouragement and rebuke all wrapped in one from Jesus at the same time, that Jesus believed he was actually capable of what he was asking him to do. And in chapter 14 at the very end, verses 34 through 36, we find they are on the other side of the lake now in a place called Gennesaret. This is very close to the place where Jesus was the first time that they came across to the other side. And if you were here with us before, you might remember the last time he came over here, they sailed through a storm. He didn't stay very long. There was actually one interaction that happened on the other side of the lake, and it was with a man that was possessed by a legion of demons. We don't even know the man's name, but we know the man's fame. He healed this man by the legion, and in so doing, the demons that were in this man ran off into a herd of pigs and took that herd of pigs careening off of a cliff into the abyss. We also know that the pigs were the main economy of that region, and so the people who knew that this happened and their livelihood was taken away by this came and in fear and exasperation demanded that Jesus leave the region. And so they come and they ask Jesus in not so nice terms to get out of town. And we had to confront that age-old human predisposition to celebrate the healing of people and the betterment of people unless it affects our bottom line and our pocketbook. The more things change, the more they stay the same. So Jesus left on a bit of a sour note. And how is it that when he arrives now this second time, look how different it is. When they crossed over, they came to Gennesaret, and when the men of the place recognized him, they sent all around the region. And they didn't come out with a mob to chase him away again. They sent all around the region, and they brought to him all who were sick, and they implored him that they might touch the fringe of his garment. From the last time he was there to get out of town, we cannot deal with this kind of power. It's wrecking our economy, to if we can just touch him. And as many as were touched, or as many as touched it, were made well. What has changed for these people? This is significant. If you remember that man that Jesus healed, we don't know his name. Do you remember that when he was healed and in his right mind and dressed and people marveled, he said to Jesus, "Let me go with you." And we talked about how interesting it was that Jesus turned him away and said no. There are lots of times throughout the Gospels where someone says they want to follow Jesus, but they don't really know what it means to follow Jesus. And he corrects them by saying, "You don't know what you're signing up for," and he sends them away. But in this instance, it wasn't that. Jesus told him, "No, you cannot come with me, but instead, go tell your family, go tell your friends, go tell everyone how much the Lord has done for you." And this man and his testimony are the only difference between these people chasing Jesus away or trying to get a touch from him on this day. And we have to mention it again because this man was a guy with zero synagogue experience. He's a Gentile. He has zero money, zero social standing, zero influence. His life was a mess, zero political power. He had no seminary training. He was wholly unqualified in our eyes to do anything in ministry. He had no podcast to listen to. He had no Bible to read, no scrolls. He had no VBS. He had nothing but the testimony of what Jesus had done in his life. And for that reason, now thousands of people are flocking to Jesus as soon as he makes landfall. I wonder, when I show up in a village or town, does anybody come to see Jesus because of my testimony? I wonder if that would be the result of how I'm living my life. I'm convicted by this. Family, listen to me close. Don't you ever underestimate what God can do through your story. Don't ever doubt what God wants to do, can do, and will do if you will just go and tell the people that he brings into your life what the Lord has done for you. Don't overcomplicate what Jesus asks us to do. I don't care how untrained you are. If he can reach people through this untrained former demoniac, then he can reach people through each and every person that is in this room this morning. And if you are sitting here thinking, I grew up in church and I don't have a story like that worth sharing, I would just lovingly, humbly encourage you to take a deep look back at the gospel and do not leave until it sinks in, because none of us, not me compared to a demoniac or you compared to the worst of us, needs Jesus less than the next of us. Nobody needs Jesus more than the other or the next guy. We all need Jesus equally because we are all fallen and hopeless without him. And what I'm just saying as we get started this morning is if we can let go of our categories, it might be that God can work through some of your stories. If we can let go of our categories, there are plenty of stories of just how much God has done for you. Interesting thing starts to open up chapter 15. The Pharisees and scribes now come to Jesus from Jerusalem, and this is significant because most of the Pharisees and scribes live in the Galilee where Jesus is from and does most of his ministry. Their home base is in a town called Capernaum by the sea, but now that John the Baptist is out of the way, there's only one person who stands in opposition to the religious regime and the political regime of the time, and that is Jesus. And so these guys from Jerusalem take it upon themselves to go and figure out who this Jesus guy is, what he is teaching, and how can we trip him up and figure out what to do with him. In one way, they're doing their job because they are the religious leaders. They're supposed to be making sure that false teaching isn't coming and entering in among the people. But in another way, they are idolatrous in that they seek to preserve their power and their status and their station. And they honor their traditions more than they actually honor the heart and intent of the law that God has given them. And so they show up to test Jesus and they ask him about commandments. They ask him why his disciples don't wash their hands and keep some of the traditions. Jesus just rebukes them straightly saying, look, your lips honor me, your hearts are far from me. He goes on to say that they worship him in vain and they teach as doctrines the commandments of men. Point blank, this could be a whole sermon series right here just on this sequence of text, but we're not going to do that this morning. The point that I want us to get is that they are coming and bringing something that they have decided is more important than what God has decided is most important. And Jesus isn't afraid to call them on the carpet for it right there. It's not their last exchange with him, so I'm going to move forward from that because we're coming back to them. There's an interesting encounter here between Jesus and a Syrophoenician woman that is pretty famous. We're also not going to dig into that this morning, but I want to give you some homework. And the homework is, if you want to take some time and go down the nerd rabbit hole on this story, I want you to email me the word crumbs. I'm serious. Email the word crumbs and we'll come back and we'll talk about it because there is so much more to this story than we can do in this Sunday, and it deserves its own time. It is part of the narrative that Jesus is weaving today because this Syrophoenician woman is also a Gentile. And she exhibits, in a strange way, an incredible mastery of the text, an incredible mastery of the law, the Torah, that even Jesus is shocked by. And it motivates Jesus to continue on this mission that he's on the other side, and to blow it up and take it to even higher levels. And he does that at a famous encounter that happens in chapter 15. See, in chapter 15, beginning in verse 29, after he deals with the Syrophoenician woman, it says that Jesus goes on from there and walks beside the Sea of Galilee. He goes up on the mountain and he sits down. And it says great crowds came to him, bringing with them the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. And they put them at his feet and he healed them. So that the crowd wondered, and when they saw the mute speaking, and the crippled healthy, and the lame walking, and the blind seeing, they glorified the God of Israel. Here is where you need your highlighter. Please go into your text digitally or physically, however you are rolling today, and highlight, they glorified the God of Israel, because that is a key point for us to take from this whole sequence of events today. We need to keep that with us and in our hearts in everything that we do, because it's the reason we ought to be doing everything that we do. In verse 29 through 39, we see the beginnings of what becomes a second big feeding. It's a feeding of the 4,000, not the 5,000. In fact, the 5,000 is so famous that a lot of times when people read the feeding of the 4,000, they assume that it's the same thing, and they just confuse the numbers. But we already did the big feeding that Jesus multiplied loaves and fish, and maybe this is just another account of the same thing. No, this is a separate situation that happens. Let me read it for you. Jesus calls his disciples after the crowds begin to wonder and glorify the God of Israel. And he says this, I have compassion on the crowd. That's the second thing you need to highlight today. Because they have been with me now 3 days and they have nothing to eat. I am unwilling to send them away hungry. Highlight that. That's the third thing. lest they faint on the way. They glorified God, Jesus has compassion, and he is unwilling to not do something about it. Those are the three things I want you to keep for the duration of this sermon. The disciples say to him, where are we to get enough bread in such a desolate place to feed so great a crowd? And Jesus says to them, how many loaves do you have? Just what do we bring to the table already? They said 7 and a few small fish. And directing the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves and fish, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 7 baskets full of broken pieces left over. Those were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And after that, sitting with the crowds, he got in the boat and went to the region of Magadan. Now, haven't we been here before? Not too long ago, in this portion of text, we hopped over last week. Jesus was one of his most famous moments, because we didn't talk about the feeding of the 5,000. That was the occasion where he had 5 loaves and 2 fish specifically. But if you go back and you read that in Matthew 14, he was once again moved by compassion by the crowds. He had been healing, and with little provision, he instructed his disciples to feed the people. And this feels like it's recounting the exact same event. And we always hear about the 5,000, not the 4,000, but I want to point out to you that this is a very different situation. It's not just that the number of people that Jesus fed was different. One, there's significance to the numbers that he's using. We'll talk about that in a second, but this is not in the Galilee. See, the first time he fed people, it was near home base. It was their countrymen. And they complained about it being desolate then because there weren't shops and food around. But this is actually on the other side. This is in Gentile territory. In every way, this is actually out of bounds. This is outside the lines. So back in Matthew 14, it says they were in a desolate place with nowhere to buy food. But on this occasion, they're in a worse situation because not only are they far from buying food, if there was a place that they could, they're in Gentile territory. And that means they all become ceremonially unclean if they go and interact in those situations. And so we need to give a little bit of grace to the disciples when they ask, where are we going to get enough bread? Because on the one hand, we have to admit this is a different situation than last time on some levels. But on the other hand, we do have to say, how short are the memories that could be worried about supply when they're standing next to the supplier who has supplied for this situation before? And I just want to say before we're too critical of them, isn't this just like us? Haven't you seen God come through again and again and again? I just want to say, if you're here this morning, God has been coming through for you, and it means that he's still coming through for you. But isn't it true that the slightest change in our scenery or our situation have the ability to discourage us and disfigure our vision so that we become focused and obsessed about the wrong things? See, it's human nature. It's what we do to obsess about the problem instead of realizing and remembering that we are with the provider. And we love to ruminate in our anxiety about the lack of supply when we stand next to the supplier and we say, yes, indeed, he lives in me. And we always seem to be afraid that there's not going to be enough. When Jesus from the beginning has said and has been reassuring us and proving to us that there is enough, always enough, because he is enough. So what are the disciples missing here, and how can we keep from missing it too? I think it's found in verse 32 and 33. Reread them with me again. In verse 32, it says, Jesus called the disciples. He said, I have compassion on the crowd because they have been with me for 3 days and have nothing to eat. It's significant that he says, I'm unwilling to let them go away hungry, lest they faint on the way. He is intimately involved and in recognition of the human experience that they're having, okay? Remember, his whole adventure so far has been correcting the disciples' vision about the kingdom, even trying to correct the disciples and the religious leaders' visions of the kingdom. It's important because sometimes the thing that keeps us from participating in the kingdom is remembering that when we're with Jesus, we never lack for supply. And that when we're with Jesus, we are always operating in a surplus. The thing that can keep us from seeing what we need to see when we look at the world is our vision. And Jesus says, I have compassion for these people. But when the disciples look at the situation, what do they say? They say, where are we to get enough bread in such a desolate place? You see, Jesus leads with compassion because he sees people first. But the disciples lead with the problem because that's what they see first. Jesus sees people. The disciples see a problem. Jesus is motivated by compassion, and the disciples are motivated by the lack of quantity. Church, this morning, if you want to see the kingdom breaking out around us, the first step is to adjust our vision. We need to go back and take another look and make sure that we see whether we're not missing something that is right in front of us. Because the answer to the problem here is right in front of the disciples. We have a fun game that we like to play in our house, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this later, but we'll see. Does anybody have a wife or even mom or sister, I don't know, that will lose their cell phone 3 or 4 times a day? We're really in trouble today, men. I'm going to take this one for you. My wife Maggie is a really good sport because we have a game about it now. What happens is she'll put it down somewhere, and then she'll forget where she put it, and she'll literally walk back into the place where it actually is, but her focus is on other things, so she misses the thing that is right in front of her. And we play a game now where I will also go and look, and if I see it in a place where she should be able to see it, I will not tell her where it is. Because it is worse if I say, babe, it's right there if it was a snake that bit you, than to just say, go look again. And then she finds it. Right? Just an adjustment of the perspective and the vision changes what she sees in the room. The room hasn't changed. For the record, I lose things all the time too. So this game goes back in reverse. What I want to suggest to you is that what Jesus is doing through all of these encounters with his disciples and the way he emphatically closes these encounters with the Pharisees and scribes is basically saying, I'm not going to tell you something that you should be able to see if you just went and looked again. I need you to go back and look again. So, in the world, when we step out of this place, when you look around you, make sure that we don't just see problems, but that we see people. We need to make sure when we see people, we, like Jesus, are moved with compassion to see them fed and to tell them what the Lord has done for us and what the Lord has done for them. And I want to tell you, church, that I believe this is the only way that we're going to heal our society. I don't think that we solve wars when you see policies instead of people. I don't think we solve hunger if you see logistics and problems instead of people. I don't think you solve anything that our nation is raging about right now. I don't care if it's a border crisis or what we're supposed to do geopolitically if we see problems and policies and not people. So church, when you look at the world around you in your immediate vicinity and at large, I want to ask you to keep yourself accountable to this gospel and the way Jesus sees things and ask yourself, am I looking for problems or am I looking for people? The only way that we're going to solve anything that faces us is if we start to see situations the way Jesus does. And the smallest situations and the largest situations. When you get out and get ready to drive next to 183 and there's someone who is driving in the right lane 20 miles an hour below what they should be, like they're in a retirement community, they are a problem. But remember, they are first and foremost people. Bad waiter or waitress, you're already behind because this was a long sermon, late getting in, that is a problem. But remember, I'm just a people, and she's just a people. Okay? I want you to see people the way Jesus sees people. And then do what Jesus does next. He calls his disciples to act. It says, he gave thanks, he broke the loaves that they had, and then gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. So Jesus sees people not a problem, he is moved with compassion, and then he has the disciples act with confidence, telling them that they can do whatever he asks, commands, or wants them to do. And it is so significant that Jesus doesn't treat us or his disciples like peon lackeys who are incompetent and incapable of doing anything. It is significant that Jesus knows that we can do what he asks us to do. And that the world, when they see us doing what he asks us to do, will look on in wonder and give glory to the God of heaven. He knows that we can encourage people, equip them, and empower them. And so when Peter was on the waves last week and he looked at him and he said, Peter, I need you to know you shouldn't doubt. Anything I call you to do, you can do. He was perfectly preparing he and the disciples for this moment right here when they're going to be in a barren, uncomfortable place and all they can see are problems, but Jesus is going to say, go feed them. Don't count it. Don't think about it. Just start doing it. And then he asks the disciples to do the actual work. Church, do you know that you have an actual role to play in Jesus bringing his kingdom? It's not about you just safely crossing the finish line whenever you die and check out of this thing. He has a role for you to play. He wants you to be a part of bringing his kingdom today. Do you know that is he the source and the means? Yes. Is he the supplier? Yes. Is he the power? Absolutely, because we can do nothing without him. But he wants the coming of his kingdom to be in and through a partnership with us, a partnership with me, and a partnership with you. If Christians really want to see the world a better place, then it's less about the policy that you hope gets enacted, and it's more about learning to see people instead of problems and crowds. It's more about having the heart that Jesus had and actually feeling something, having his compassion. And it's more about not being coerced by God into doing good works, but doing good works because we are compassionate like God is. It's about moving with confidence, the confidence of Jesus, that he never lets us operate in a scarcity, that we operate in a surplus reality, that Jesus is more than enough in all situations. And the last thing here is that you need the compassion of Jesus and the confidence of Jesus, and you need to put them into action. So the question is, if you have the vision of Jesus and you see people, not problems, you have the compassion of Jesus, and you have the confidence of Jesus, what is stopping us? What is stopping you? The funny thing about this miracle, and the last miracle of its kind, is that the disciples offer an excuse. And give them some credit. It's a logical, rational excuse. So you are not off the hook when you say, I wish I could do this for the Lord, but it's just not realistic. I wish I could help this person. I wish I could make this situation better, but it's just not realistic. Do you see? That is not cutting it in Jesus' kingdom. As a matter of fact, if your goals in life are not so big that you need God's help to bring them to pass, then they are too small. Because a goal that is small enough for you to accomplish without the aid of God is something that you get all the credit for because you were just capable. But those things that God calls us to that take him are the things that bring him glory. And this whole kingdom is about bringing him the glory. So nix the excuse that it doesn't sound realistic. Disciples offer an excuse and Jesus says, just start feeding them. And they take action, and with the confidence of Jesus, he supplied everything they need and then some. So when the disciples thought they had a legitimate reason they couldn't, it turns out it was just a lack of effort because they hadn't even tried yet. And I wonder, church, what God would do if we called our excuses what they actually are: a lack of effort. When you have the compassion of Jesus and the confidence of Jesus, and you actually try, Jesus has a history of backfilling the supply. Let's move on to the last section of the text today. I told you we're going to cover a lot of ground. This is in chapter 16, and the Pharisees and Sadducees come again. They've been following Jesus during this whole ordeal, and this is what they say. The Pharisees and Sadducees come, and they're trying to test him, and they ask him, show us a sign from heaven. Pause. If someone starts multiplying bread from heaven, come on. It's a good enough sign. Like, are they paying attention? Like they've been here the whole time? And Jesus answers them in verse 2. He says, when it's evening, you say, it'll be fair weather for the sky is red. In the morning, it'll be stormy today and the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times? Like you haven't been paying attention at all? Like what game have you been watching? Like what are you guys doing over there? Are you just huddled up and oblivious to everything that is happening? He goes on in verse 4, an evil, adulterous generation acts for a sign. He calls them adulterous because it's their idolatry and their pride that is keeping them from seeing what is right in front of them. He says an evil and adulterous generation seeks a sign, but no sign will be given to it except for the sign of Jonah. And he leaves and departs. He says, I'm not talking about this anymore. I'm not capitulating to your ridiculousness anymore. He is on chat support with an AI robot, not capable of rightly reasoning. He says, you guys need to go and look again. And he uses this phrase, the sign of Jonah. And this is a rebuke that Jesus is giving these religious leaders. And he's sending them back to the book of Jonah. Remember, we've been talking all the way through the scripture. When Jesus pulls out a quote or a reference or a hint or a book or a prophet, he's saying, you need to go back and reread this so that you can understand. And I want to know what you guys think of when you hear the sign of Jonah. We have the benefit of hindsight. What do you guys think of? What's the sign of Jonah? Who was Jonah? You think Jonah was in the whale for how many days? He's in there for 3 days, then he came back, right? And so when he says the sign of Jonah, what do you think, like, Jesus and Jonah, how do they compare? How are they alike? Yeah, Jesus in the tomb for 3 days, he's going to come out. So we immediately start thinking, especially with the benefit of hindsight, we know how the story ends, that this is Jesus saying, hey, y'all are not going to get it until you kill me and I come back again. And what's interesting is this is not the first time that he said this about the sign of Jonah. It's not the first time he said this to them. And I agree that Jonah is a type of Jesus in this way and a foreshadowing of Jesus in this way, but we can go even deeper, right? Because that's not information that's available to the people that he's talking to quite yet. He's teaching them something, and he's pointing them deeper. Not even Jesus' disciples at this point can grasp the fact that he means he's going to die and be resurrected. They won't get it until after he's resurrected. Now, Jesus does say this on one occasion and immediately points back to this, but there's got to be something else that he's pointing here to, because what are they supposed to get from this? He's saying you are missing the point. The sign is already there. You cannot see it, and it's right in front of you. And so here's how we can know what he's saying. Back in Matthew chapter 12, the Pharisees had come to Jesus on another occasion. And at that time, it says they came into contention over the keeping of the Sabbath. And the exchange where Jesus essentially rebukes them for using the law to crush people when the intent of the law was to take care of people. He tells them that you are missing the point because of your traditions. And you love your traditions more than you love people. And because of this, you will not enter the kingdom. And he says the exact same thing to them there in chapter 12. He says, some of the scribes and Pharisees answered him saying, teacher, we wish to see a sign from you. And he answered them, an evil and adulterous generation seeks a sign, word for word, but no sign will be given it except for the sign of the prophet Jonah, word for word. In verse 40 of Matthew chapter 12, here's what he says, for just as Jonah was 3 days and nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and nights in the heart of the earth. Exactly what we're thinking about when we think about the comparison between Jesus and Jonah. But that's not all he says. He says more. In verse 41, it says, the men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. For they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here. Now this got interesting. Strong language from Jesus, because by all accounts, you remember Nineveh, that was the seat of one of the most wicked nations in history. It's like saying, behold, Vladimir Putin will judge you in the judgment. This is what they would have interpreted as. Mao will judge you in the resurrection. This is what they would have interpreted as. And so this is nothing light. This is all very shocking to the religious leaders, and it's shocking for us too, but the key is understanding why he says what he says. He's trying to get them to see something. In verse 42, he continued on that occasion. He says, the queen of the south will rise in judgment of this generation and condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, something greater than Solomon is here. And there it is, the queen of the south. The queen came to Solomon. But what does that have to do with Nineveh? And moreover, what do these have to do with what Jesus is saying? And what do they have to do with this very moment and the sign of Jonah? Well, let's ask one more question. What do Nineveh and the south, or the queen of Sheba who came to see Solomon, have in common? What do they mean? The truth is, they were a picture of the house of Israel doing what it was always supposed to do. And they were a picture of what God's people was supposed to be doing for the world. Here's why. These are two Gentile nations. They represent millions of people outside of the people of God. And with these two, in Nineveh's case, they repent at the good news. And in the case of the south, the kingdom there, Sheba and their queen, they would come a day's journey just to catch the crumbs falling from the master's table. You see, the sign of Jonah was not just only the resurrection in the grave. In fact, they wouldn't have understood that until after it was all said and done. But the sign of Jonah is telling them that right in front of their eyes, they are missing that all peoples, Jew and Gentile alike, will flock to the kingdom. That when they flock to the kingdom, they will repent, they will be fed, they will be healed. You see, in the feeding of the 5,000, there were 12 baskets of leftovers taken up. 12 symbolically representing the fullness of the 12 tribes of Israel. And Jesus executed the miracle in such a way as to communicate that anyone with eyes to see and ears to hear would know that he was the one to fulfill the law and the prophets. This is the Messiah. He is the fulfillment of the 12. He was the one they were looking for. He was enough, and he has enough to supply the 12 tribes. But now he feeds yet another crowd, this time in a foreign place and a foreign people, and they collect 7 baskets of surplus. And 7 is a number in the Hebrew mind that carries more significance because 7 is the number of perfection. We crudely water it down to say, lucky number 7. Now it's the number you always pick if you got to pick a number between 1 and 10. 7 has stuck with humanity for a long time. But in the Hebrew mind, it represented perfection. 7 days. 6 days God created. On the 7th day, he said, it is good and I can rest because it is the number of completion. So now, as he takes up 7 baskets from Gentiles, it is the perfect number that means the kingdom of heaven is made complete only when all people from all nations and all ethnicities are coming to the table of the Lord to break the bread of life. Here's what this means to you. If you are not of a Hebrew descent today, then you too are the sign of Jonah. The sign of Jonah is the resurrection, and the sign of Jonah is the Syrophoenician woman. It's the Roman centurion servant. It's the 4,000. It's you. From a high view, this chapter is just a rapid-fire sequence of events that just seems to be a bunch of random encounters. We got disciples and miracles and singular Gentiles and mobs of Gentiles. We got Pharisees from Jerusalem on a road trip. We got Sadducees showing up. We got scribes. We got different combinations of people and backgrounds, all with their own issues and all with their own assumptions that Jesus has to juggle. But this section began with a storm, and what this is really just a perfect storm. And Jesus standing there on the waves, blow for blow, masterstroke after masterstroke, maneuvering with intent and precision and genius. He's teaching us all at once, and he's teaching his disciples, and he's calling them onto the waves of his mission. He is encouraging them. He's believing them. He's empowering them, and he's showing them a picture of the kingdom that nobody had considered yet. And he's doing all of this while sparring with the religious elites, and he's rebuking, he's exhorting, he's prophesying, he's warning them that they are missing the signs that are right in front of them, that Jesus is the one they have waited for, one greater than Jonah, one greater than Solomon. He is showing them that the kingdom is at hand, and they cannot see the kingdom because the kingdom is made of people, and they value above all things their traditions. Woven throughout all of this teaching, Jesus is combating and followed by masses of people, and despite all that he's juggling, he never misses the faces for the crowds. He never stops seeing the people that he's actually here for. He's cunning, he's compassionate, he's confident. He engages the crowds. They flock to him in remote, unclean places, and he demonstrates the reality of the kingdom. And he teaches us as his disciples. He rebukes us in our religion. He brings hope to the scattered all at once. It's bound up in this weird combination of events and the prophecy and the law that Jesus is walking in the fulfillment of. You see, him on the mountain feeding the 4,000s, where disciples and Pharisees and opponents and believers all exist at one time, should bring to our ears the words of the prophet Isaiah, who some of you know well, who said, "It shall come to pass in the latter days that on the mountain where Jesus sits as he has this encounter, on the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest mountains, and all shall be lifted up above the hills, and all the nations will flow unto it." And here it is, the sign of Jonah. By the word of the prophet through the Lord and Isaiah, the kingdom is truly at hand. This is the sign. So if you aren't yet a disciple of Jesus, what this means to you is that there's room for you. There is bread enough. You are welcome no matter where you have been and what you have done, for of such is made the kingdom. You need to repent and you need to turn to him. But if you are a disciple already, I want you to prayerfully consider this picture of the kingdom and Jesus' message to us. It means his kingdom is for everyone. It's made of the outsider. Of such were some of you. It means that not only that Jesus believes in you, but just as he instructed his disciples to feed the people, that he is calling us to have the eyes to see the people around us, not just the problems around us. And he wants us to ask ourselves, are we giving him an honest effort in that mission, or are we content with just giving him an excuse? And lastly, here's how we can know that the kingdom is advancing. Just look at what is happening in this series of text. Here in this place, we see three elements. We see disciples being the hands and feet of Jesus. We see people who don't understand being in opposition. And yet we see people from all places and all backgrounds coming to the mountain of the house of the Lord, being fed, being healed, and most importantly, giving glory to God because of it. When compassion moves us to love unflinchingly, and truth moves us to speak unflinchingly, that's when all people who the world estimates to be out start coming and breaking the bread of life together. And so in a little less than a chapter and a half, Jesus has gone to a faraway place. And it's kind of confusing why he would be doing all of these things in this rapid fire sequence, and why he would be engaging this way, and why he would end the whole thing by saying, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Well, the reality is, sometimes he doesn't need to. Sometimes you just need to look back and see what he's already been up to. You'll see the kingdom right in front of you. Church, this morning, are there people in front of you who you have called problems? In front of you, are there opportunities where you've given an excuse and it only takes a little bit of effort? And do you see all of the people from all backgrounds and tribes and ethnicities starving, hungry for something real? Because when Jesus sees that, he says, I am unwilling to send them away. And our mission and our purpose is to make sure that we're unwilling to send them away also. That's what the kingdom is made of. And that's executed by a genius, Jesus. If you're here this morning and you've not entered the kingdom, there is bread enough for us to break together, and we would love nothing more than to pray with you and assist you as you take a step towards Jesus. Will you come as we stand and sing?